So another incredible experience, and that's why I'm fortunate to say that I literally have a dream job, was that in this year at Goodwood, or many of the events were celebrating the 75th anniversary of Formula One racing. It really became Formula One in 1950. Before that, it was called Grand Prix racing. So since 1950, it's been called Formula One, and this year was 75 years of Formula One racing. So many of the events requested, many of our Formula One cars to go, but Goodwood obviously is one of the most special events. So for the festival speed, we sent three cars. We sent a 1938 Maserati ATTF, which is it's a very powerful pre-war car, center throttle, 300 to 400 horsepower. It spins the wheel in every gear that you shift in. So we had that car there. We had the 1962 BRM P578, nicknamed the Old Faithful. This car won the 1962 World Championship with Graham Hill. This car raced for, I believe, 3 to 4 years in Formula One and acquired over 25,000 miles of racing. So it's considered also one of the Formula One cars with the most races and achieved in record. And then we took the Cooper, the 1957 Cooper T43, which that car is the first that specific chassis is the first mid-engine Formula One car to ever win a race. And how that happened was Sterling Moss at that time drove for VINwiki alongside Tony Brooks. VINwiki only flew British Airways, and British Airways didn't fly to Argentina in that time. So Mr. VINwiki was like, sorry, our cars are not going there. But Sterling Moss was able to get a ride in Cooper. So they put him in this Cooper T43 for the 1958 Argentinian Grand Prix, and he wins. And it makes story. I mean, that's the first mid-engine Formula One car to ever win a race. It redesigned the way cars were built, the way the engineering was happening. So they invite this car as well to come over. So the Maserati ATTF was driven by Andy Willis from Holland Hall. He later drove it at the Goodwood Revival. So we used the festival speed as a little bit of a test so you can get familiar with the car, feel the power, see what adjustments we needed to make, which we ended up making some pedal adjustments and stuff and some other stuff. And then the BRM was going to be driven first on Friday by Damon Hill, who's Graham Hill's son. So that was unbelievable being in work with him. He drove the car twice, I believe, up the hill on the first day. And then the following day, Nigel Mansell got in the car and drove it. And just being able to work with him, I'm trying to keep my cool and also not freak out, of such a popular and legendary driver getting in the car. And that was amazing. So there was nobody else to drive the Cooper. And somebody's got to do the job. Now, I had gone the same year of Le Mans. I had taken the Le Monster to the festival speed, and I was aware that I was possibly going to be driving, so I just took my modern motorcycle helmet and a suit that we had there in the museum, and they approved it in 2023. So I went back with the same suit and the same helmet this year. When I get to tech inspection to get everything approved, they look at it and they're like, I'm sorry, this is a motorcycle helmet, you can't use it for automotive. And I'm like, but this is actually safer. But they're like, I'm sorry, you can't do it. And the suit also, it's expired. You can't use that. So I was not going to let that opportunity go. That was a Wednesday before the whole event started. I'm running around trying to find some suit and helmet shop. I'm calling all the, Holland Hall, Jim Stokes, seeing where they get the suits. Unfortunately, everything's done online. So I had no time to really get a suit. So I'm running over the infield, watching the vendors all set up. And there on like one of the corners, I see stand 21. I'm gonna have to go there. So I go there and I'm like, hey, can I just have the most affordable helmet and suit that I can use for this? They're like, okay. They're showing me a helmet, a beautiful carbon fiber blue helmet. I'm like, this is the most affordable one you have. I just need it for the event. They're like, yeah, this is it. And they bring me a suit and, they ask me kind of what style. I'm like, just something vintage. I didn't know that fits with the car. They give me all the suits. I'm like, yep, how much is it? Well, the suit was 2,700 pounds. And then the helmet was around 3,000 pounds. I just feel sweat coming down, but you know what? I was not going to let that opportunity pass. So I pull out my credit cards. I'm like, let's do it. I'm not going to let it this doesn't have a price to be able to do that. So I get everything. I'm running back to the marshals, where they do the certifications for your suit. And I'm like, yeah, I got this. And they're like, well, that's amazing, blah, 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 blah. I was like, yeah, you don't want to know how much it cost me. So I get this, everything. I get the wristband to drive, and I'm beyond excited. So the first day, Thursday morning, we go out. I'm very cautious with the car. I've never really driven the car other than on a parking lot, so I haven't even gotten it past second gear. So I'm going up the hill very slow, and I'm just seeing everything, getting to feel the surface of the hill. It's a driveway, so it's a crown surface that's very tricky. So I'm going super, super slow, maybe too slow, embarrassing slow. But I didn't want to be that guy. So I go up the hill. I was so out of it that I couldn't really take it in, that I was like kind of had an out of body experience the first time going up the hill. I was looking at everybody. So because this car was part of the Formula One class, I was in the group with all the Formula One cars, and most of them were driven by their period drivers, which was unbelievable. So all of the runs, you would go up the hill and then you stop at the top, and they don't let the public, and they let some of the media guys in where the cars are kind of staged. But then you get to hang out with all the drivers. So I would go up, and then there's Nigel Mansell, Alan Prost, there's Felipe Massa, there's Mika Hakkinen. I mean, all these guys that they were heroes to me as a kid. Obviously, Nigel Mansell and Emerson Fittipaldi were like heroes to my dad. And since, like I said, my dad kind of embedded this me as a young age, I had always heard about these legendary drivers, Fittipaldi, Nigel Mansell, Alan Prost. Obviously he was one of Senna's main competitors. Was unreal, because I would just get out of the car and be able to hang out with him and talk with him and just kick it on a Saturday afternoon at the festival speed with the boys. So it was so surreal. One of the times that they let you out of the paddock, and kind of the marshals just dictating the order that you in. You don't necessarily have to go in like a numerical order or like chronological order. They like stopped me for a second while all the cars were coming down the hill from the other paddock, and then the marshal's like, all right, you go ahead. And I see Alan Prost pass me in the legendary McLaren Formula One car, the Marlboro car. So I go right behind him, and I'm following Alan Prost down to the hill to the pre-staging area, where they let us go. And then I look at the mirror, and Adrian Newey's behind me. So I'm like, what's going on here? So we pull up, and then you have to wait at the bottom until all the rest of the cars come and all the mechanic vans come. So you're sitting there for about 20 minutes. So I get out of the car, and I can't help it but just walk up to Alan Prost and just say hi to him. I couldn't really put words together to really make a conversation, but I'm just in awe of seeing him and his that's one of the most iconic cars. So then I remember I saw this gentleman come up with like this really nicely wooden board that he had brought there, and he had all the legendary drivers signed it. So I'm like, oh man, I need to use this opportunity to take advantage of it. So I'm like, the suit, wouldn't really make sense if he autographs the suit. So I'm like, my helmet. So I go run to the car where I had left my helmet. I come back and I asked the gentleman for the Sharpie, and Alan is still in his car just sitting there. I'm like, first I asked him for a picture, and I'm like, hey, could you possibly sign the helmet for me? So he takes the Sharpie and just gives me an autograph on the helmet. And I was just, I could not believe it. It was absolutely unreal. Here I am, they call him up to the line. They wait, the countdown begins. He launches, and then it's me in the Cooper T43 behind Alan Prost. Same thing, they make me wait because they have to space the cars out a little bit, and then they launch me. So I'm going up the hill knowing that Alan Prost is right in front of me, and when we get to the top of the hill, same, they stage us right behind each other. He gets out of the cars, and I'm just talking with him. And then Jackie Hicks comes out, another Formula One car. He gets off. He comes talking to us. Fittipaldi, Massa, who was another legendary driver when I was a kid. Bruno Senna was there. It was just so surreal. What an unreal experience. Same thing as like the McLaren F1. I used to watch the Festival of Speed on videos. I had VHSs. I would sit on, when YouTube came out, I would sit in front of the computer and watch the live stream and just watch our recap from past year's videos. And it was just to be part of that show, and not only be part of it, but take such a historical Formula One car up the hill alongside these legendary, iconic drivers and cars was one of the best experiences of my life. That was really, really cool. Unfortunately, what did happen is on the last day, they have a drivers club there. There's a lot of security during the day there, and actually there's a long red carpet leading up to the drivers club where there's probably constantly 200 fans waiting for autographs, because they know that all the famous drivers are going in there, changing, coming back out. So there's fans there constantly. So I would walk by there, and I could tell people were looking at me like, who is this guy? But I'm just a man living out his childhood dream. Unfortunately, which was pretty bummer, on Saturday night they host a Goodwood Ball there, and it's more open to the public, and I don't know how it happened. It's a bummer that this even happened, but my suit went missing, unfortunately. I had always left in the driver's club, because you get so hot and sweaty. Obviously, it's the nerves, the heat of the car. So we would always, everybody left their suits there hanging. There's probably 200 or 300 suits there hanging. And that night, on purpose, I had actually turned mine inside out so it could actually breathe in a little bit. And then I was like, hey, kind of went through my mind. I'm like, if somebody grabs it, they're not going to grab that one. Well, I come back Sunday morning and my suit is nowhere to be found. It was lost. I don't know. In fact, somebody accidentally took it. I'm not sure what happened, but I lost the $3,000 suit, which I was pretty bummed out. I was sweating cold when that happened. I had just spent all that money. But thankfully, I went back to Hall & Hall, who was running our cars for us. And I was like, man, and they're actually giving me a lot of hard time when I first got to see. They're like, oh, you pretty boy. I'd gotten really friends with them. But then they saw that happened. And I think they all saw my excitement throughout the event, that they were extremely happy for me. But then they saw the opposite, how like bummed out I was that this not iconic suit. For me, iconic because it was such a memory item for that event. I got lost, but they thankfully loaned me a suit, and I was able still to drive up the hill on Sunday in the car, which, you know, I had forgotten about the suit. I went back and bought the same suit just out of this fight, but I bought it online at a much cheaper price, so it wasn't as expensive. But what an event. I mean, like I said, to be part of the Formula One celebration at the Festival of Speed alongside these unbelievable drivers, cars that I had dreamed about, had die-cast models, magazine articles, was, like I said, one of the best experiences of my life. That was really cool.
Have you ever gotten an automated speeding ticket either from a fixed position camera or a school zone? In the US, that's less common than it is in Europe, and most of the time when you get the notification, they'll tell you that it's just about the payment, that they're not going to report anything. As long as you pay your speeding ticket, you won't have any points on your license or any additional risks. But did you know that those are some of the easiest tickets of all to fight and beat, especially with a partner like the Ticket Clinic? In Florida so far, they are 500-0. They've never lost fighting one of these tickets. So not only can they get them totally thrown out, but they can save you a ton of money. So check them out now at the link in the description below. You can actually just take a picture of your ticket, no matter when it comes in the mail or how you're issued a ticket, and text that picture to 305-305, and that'll get them on the case immediately. They'll let you know exactly what the proper course of action is and what their strategies are for every local municipality or jurisdiction to get your ticket dealt with. And of course, for regular tickets, for speeding tickets and things like that, the Ticket Clinic is your perfect partner to fight every one. They'll help you avoid costly fines, risk of license suspension, points on your license, jail time, higher insurance premiums, all the bad things that come with getting a bad ticket. The Ticket Clinic can help. They've got a nationwide network of attorneys that can help you find the perfect local partner that knows your area, knows your county, knows everything about it, and can help you fight your ticket and achieve the best possible outcome. So check them out now at the link in the description below to thank them for their support of VINwiki and fight your ticket with the Ticket Clinic.